for here tonight. And then my coworker, Kat's going to talk a little bit about the impacts this project has more specifically to Eastern Washington. We have a number of folks joining us via phone and computer for the webinar. So we also have everyone listening in who's not in this room tonight. So that's always good to know. And after Kat, we will have a short break for questions so everyone can get all their questions answered about the environmental impact statement, the draft, where we're at in that process, and what our concerns are really that we'd like to bring up in our public testimony. And then we will go into our giving public testimony section, and Barb will give us a short presentation from there, giving some tips and advice from her own experience as to what we want to get accomplished with this public testimony. And then after that, Bryd is going to bring it home for us and wrap us up for the evening. And I don't think Grace is here yet. But she's on her way though. Okay, yeah, and she did email me earlier today, so hopefully she's on her way and we'll get to catch the beginning of this as well. So just before we get into all the work we still have to get done with this project, I want to take a minute just to recognize all of the battles that we have won in regards to big coal. Just this past year, two of the largest coal companies, Arch Coal and Peabody Energy, have declared bankruptcy. The Otter Creek Mine and the Tongue River Railroad have been defeated. And just last week, the Army Corps of Engineers denied permits for the Gateway Pacific Terminal at Cherry Point on the grounds of it violating the Lummi Nation's treaty rights. So this was a really historic win for all of us working on this project, but mostly for treaty rights, and hopefully that will set the stage for what we will see moving forward in our state and in our world. So now that leaves one proposed coal terminal in Washington state. That is the 44 million metric ton coal export terminal in Longview, to move coal from mostly the Powder River Basin area by rail to be exported from Longview to markets abroad. And not only does this type of project greatly exacerbate the effects of climate change by increasing greenhouse gas emissions, it also has really damaging effects to our human health, increasing asthma and cancer rates, affects the quality of our waterways, our natural environment, and many other impacts such as noise pollution and holding up traffic, particularly for first responder vehicles. So those are only a few of the impacts that we'll see, and Beth's going to go into more detail on those later on as well. So this Millennium Bult Terminals is the applicant for this project. And then for this environmental review process for the EIS, the deciding agencies are Cowlitz County and the Washington State Department of Ecology. And Millennium Bult Terminals actually first applied for these permits in 2009, and what they applied for were permits for a 5.7 million metric ton coal export terminal, and they were later forced to withdraw those permits after it came out that they were planning on exporting 60 million metric tons of coal. So we've already seen that this is a company that we can't trust. They tried to sneak those permits in. Tried to sneak those permits in for us because they knew they wouldn't be able to as easily receive permits for a larger coal export terminal. So they then reapplied for permits in 2012, which brings us up to speed with this current environmental review process. And the first stage of this process is called scoping, and that's when the deciding agencies, so in this case Cowlitz County and the Washington State Department of Ecology, look at how broad this environmental impact statement will be. So how many of these damaging effects it will cover. So we want this EIS to be as broad as possible. So we really bring to light all of the impacts and effects that a terminal such as this has. And the coal companies, on the other hand, prefer this to be a really narrow review, because then they won't have to deal with and really think about the impacts of this project. And luckily for us, we did get our wish when, thanks to all the work you did and many more, in 2013, we got over 215,000 scoping comments, which really forced this to be a very comprehensive draft of the environmental impact statement. And This environmental impact statement, this draft, is a really critical tool for us because it not only lays out all of the effects of this project, or most of them, it gives us a chance to be a part of the deciding process and give our public comments. So the public comment window is 45 days for this, and it just began on April 29th. So that gives us about another month now until June 13th to write in comments, submit online comments, and go to the public hearings to give our public testimony. So this is the time, this is our crucial window right now to turn out in opposition to this project and really have our voices heard. So we're right in the middle of that comment window right now, and what's important to note, so what we're really trying to ask for is to not have this terminal built, right? But in environmental impact statement jargon, that's called the no action alternative, and that means that the Millennium boat terminals will not be granted the permits that they need to move forward with this project. So that's why on our comment cards and stuff, you look at the general ask, it's called the no action alternative, because that's, every EIS has to explore that alternative, but it's up to us to kind of force their hand and make sure that that's the one that we're moving forward with. So with that, I'll turn it over to Beth, who will give you more insight on the content and concerns of the draft EIS as we move into the final EIS process. Thanks, Emily.
Okay. You're gonna do slides?
I'll do slides here. Do you want me to do them over there as well?
I can do them.
Okay, perfect.
Great. So I'm Beth Doglio, and I've been working as the director of this campaign. Oh, do I walk
You're
up?
perfect.
Okay.
You're awesome.
I've been working as the director of this campaign for the last 6 years. I co-direct with my colleague Stacia Kearns from the Sierra Club. I work for Climate Solutions. Climate Solutions was started here in Olympia about 18 years ago now. We're a regional organization that stretches from Montana to Washington, takes in Oregon and Idaho. And I also work in BC because there is a coal terminal that is proposed in BC that is still on the books that we're also trying to make sure goes away. So we did have some really, really great news last week. The Lummi Nation had asked the Army Corps to deny the permit for the 48 million ton facility in Whatcom County. And lo and behold, the Army Corps actually upheld treaty rights and denied the permit. They said this project, because of the size of the dock, interferes with the tribe's ability to exercise their fishing rights on unusual and accustomed grounds. It's a very strong decision. It's a very bold move for a tribe to take that step because it puts in jeopardy years and years and years of a promise that was made to them. It puts it into jeopardy legally. So the last one that's left in the U.S. is the one that we're talking about right now. It is not sited on ancestral burial grounds and usual accustomed fishing lands in Longview. It's actually on industrial property that's been industrial and been polluted for many, many years. It's in a community that is a little bit more blue collar and has a higher unemployment rate than Whatcom County. It has a long history of being an industrial city. So it's proving to be a more difficult one to kill. It's the last one standing. But we're in the middle of a process now, and you can go ahead and switch. So we're going to work really hard and try and bring all of the issues out that need to be considered in the final environmental impact statement. So this is just a quick map of where we have worked in the past. We have killed facilities at Coos Bay, 2 on the Columbia River on the Oregon side, another one in Grace Harbor, and then if you click, the one in Bellingham just last week. So next slide. Click again. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about hearing logistics. We're here today because hopefully you're thinking about going to the hearing If not, we're also going to talk about how to do a really good substantive written comment as well. So next slide. So just briefly, Emily talked a little bit about it. We are at the draft environmental impact statement. This is the very last time that the public has the opportunity to comment on this particular facility. So there's a very large document. It weighs many, many pounds, actually. I think it's 20 pounds or something. I don't know. So I can't remember the exact, but it's very heavy. And 217,000 comments actually were submitted in the scoping that helped to sort of define what the issues are that the draft environmental impact statement looks at. And it's actually organized quite well, and you can go online and sort of look through that and pull out things that are of interest to you and go into a lot more depth than we're going to be able to do in the 20 minutes that I'm going to be yapping at you about it. She mentioned it is the Powell's County and the Department of Ecology on this draft environmental impact statement. The Corps is doing their own separate analysis, and I just got word from them that's been delayed, and it'll be coming out at the end of September. That's the current timeline for that. So we'll be doing this all again. Next slide. So the hearing on May 24th, which is a week from today, is at the fairgrounds, at the event center here. And we do have a hospitality suite if you go, and that's a place where you can get refreshments and sort of freshen up. It's the Red Star there. I think it's important to note that Millennium Bult Logistics reserved all of the rooms possible. So we are not actually on the site. So anyway, next. So the hearing begins at 1 o'clock. There will be a presentation by the consultants that have written the draft environmental impact statement and Department of Ecology. That same presentation will happen again at 5. Our bus here leaves at, what time does the bus for Olympia leave? At
10:40.
10:40, meeting at the Martin Way. 10:40. And returning at 5, right after the rally. We'll have a rally at 4. So in terms of the coal issue, hopefully, fingers crossed, this will be the last opportunity to go to a hearing. And they're pretty amazing things. It's just like a sea of red, and people are, speak for 2 minutes and provide a lot of really interesting information and good, solid information. So it's definitely worth going. So approximately 160 people can testify, and we're really hoping to prioritize the voices of Longview. So even if you go and you don't wish to testify, we want you to get a ticket. It's a lottery system, and we have a very elaborate system to sort of switch and make sure that the folks that have put energy into writing their testimony have the opportunity to do that. So you would just drop your ticket off at the hospitality suite once you get it if you don't want to testify. If you do want to testify, we really want to hear all the voices, and so you should hold on to your ticket. Okay, next. Okay, so Barb's going to talk a little bit more about this, but it is 2 minutes. I think it's good to write it out. You always talk longer than you think you're going to talk, so it's really good to time yourself. You want to make it personal, and you definitely want to talk about who you are. Like I would say, I'm Beth Doglio, and I might talk a little bit about being the director of Power Past Coal, but I would also say I'm also the mom of 2 young boys, and that's why I'm here today to testify. So I think, you only have 2 minutes. It's a short amount of time, sticking to one point, telling stories, and particularly stories where you think you might be impacted. So one of the things that I sometimes share is that my grandparents, both of my grandfathers were coal miners and worked for Peabody Energy. And so, sometimes this work is very hard for me because we really are trying to we really are transitioning away from coal. And I would like to think that my grandfathers would be super supportive of this work and not having to spend that 8 hours a day chipping away underground. So that's something that I sometimes share. The most important thing is that you want to say no action alternative is your preferred choice. So in a draft environmental impact statement, that is one of the options. And that basically is they'll be able to operate under the current lease that's in place, the sublease that's in place. They're moving some alumina. They were, unfortunately, Alcoa has shut down their operations, so even that's not happening at this site any longer. So that would be, they'd be able to continue operating and doing the cleanup that they are doing. Okay, next slide. Okay, so comments. You can also, if you cannot make it to the hearing, you can do a written comment. You can actually do as many written comments as you like. So if you care about, 3 or 4 different issues or 5 or 6, you can actually, over the course of the next few weeks until June 13th, sort of just write out, I'm concerned about air quality, I'm concerned about vessel traffic, and put some bullet points under that and send those in. And that sort of helps us build our numbers. We do have a goal of getting in about 265,000 comments, which is seeming very hard at this moment, but we still have that goal.
We can do it.
So let's see, next slide. So there's some other ways you can help as well. We are phone banking. I did check with one of these two that we could phone bank. We're not having organized phone banks here in Thurston County, but you can phone bank from your home if you'd like to do that. Also, writing a letter to the editor, to the Olympian, they have a 250-word limit. If you want to bake something, if you like to bake, we do need some help with food at the hospitality suite. If you'd like to volunteer that day, that would be great. You can contact Sandy Davis. She's one of the amazing leaders in Longview. And then, of course, some of us are wearing red. I'm not wearing my red today. Okay. We all wear red, so let's see your red. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the details in the draft environmental impact statement. Greenhouse gases, coal dust, rail traffic, vessel traffic, and health. All right. So one of the the reason that Climate Solutions is engaged in this issue is because of the greenhouse gases. It's an odd thing that this project came to light just as we had secured a deal in the legislature to shutter the Centralia coal plant. Because in fact, this will burn about 7 times what that coal plant would. It would release that much more, and it would become one of the largest emitters in the state of Washington if it is built, just on its operations alone. So next slide. Yeah.
Operations from what?
Operations from just operating the facility, not even the emissions itself, like from burning it.
They're not burning coal.
From the transportation, right? The burning of the coal will take place in another country, which of course will come back and have impacts on us. But just the operation of it, moving it, so, a lot of trains, and then a lot of vessels, so all of that also contributes to greenhouse gases. So we're talking 44 million tons of coal, that's over 90 million tons of downstream emissions. So that is when you burn it. It creates 90 million tons. And there's some odd assumptions in the analysis that lead the regulators to basically say, you really don't have to mitigate that much of it, because we think you're going to displace coal that would be, this coal will displace other coal. And so you have to take that in account when you apply the greenhouse gas emission quotient. Does that make sense? Okay, great. And so they're only saying that they need to mitigate for 1.27 million tons of carbon pollution, and clearly that is a long way from 90 million tons. So that's a significant problem within the draft environmental impact statement.
What do they base that on? I mean, that seems like a vast assumption.
Well, it's mostly the displacement issue. They're basically saying these things, you know, this is going to displace other coal that would be burned elsewhere. So like in China, they burn their coal, right? Well, if we're exporting and they're importing our coal, they would burn less of this coal. And
I know, and that's what I'm wondering is, I understand the concept. I'm wondering what basis in fact it has.
So to be honest with you, we are having a really hard time getting a hold of how they are actually doing their analysis. We've been having some very intense conversations with the contractor to try and figure out it, and it's a proprietary modeling system.
Aren't they all? You know, that's
Right.
so ridiculous. Let's keep it all secret until you couldn't understand it anyway.
Right, so we're trying to chip away at that, and we've actually hired experts to do our own. We're going to provide expert testimony on greenhouse gas analysis. There's a fellow professor out of Montana, Tom Howard from the University of Montana, that we've worked with in the past that's going to be doing some different modeling, but unfortunately he's having trouble getting understanding how they're doing the modeling. Yeah.
Not to belabor this, but it sounds like the displacement is going to have to be on a global basis.
It's going to have to be on the what?
On a global basis, because
Right.
you just clarified that the emission of the air pollution that's going to be caused on site is from handling the coal, transporting it, moving it around,
Right.
not burning.
Right.
So if you're talking about displacement, you must be saying, well, we're going to burn our coal in China and not burn Brazil's coal.
Right.
What sense
So
does that
there are two different things. There's the on-site emissions, and then there's the downstream emissions when the combustion at the site. This is that 90 million tons is the downstream emissions, not the
From burning.
yeah.
I have a question. Do you think it's a reasonable, I guess, lever to use to insert into the equation and the discussion a comment about this limitation to displacement of coal only, exceedance of displaced coal for the mitigation of the greenhouse gases, is as absurd as when the regulatory agency is telling us that they can't consider global issues because they don't have enough information about what will eventually happen. We can only consider local. And that in essence, what I'm asking is, can we use their own framing to let them know that they can't have their cake and eat it too, that they either have to consider all ramifications, global and local, or they have to self-limit their implications to local ones, which would obviate the ability to say that the use of this coal eventually will be displaced, or, will be displacing some other coal source, because they don't know that, and they can't quantify it, and that is global.
Yeah.
And so if they're not going to allow us to speak about global issues, then they have to allow us to speak about the effects of burning this amount of coal, because that's all we know about, that's all we can quantify. That's the local knowledge. So in a sense, it's turning the argument on its head, saying, yes, we're going to consider global issues because climate change affects us here locally. And we know that if you're exporting this coal, it's getting burned, and that will contribute to climate change. So we can't know what's happening down the rock, down the pipe.
Then you just have to consider it.
You have to consider it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as simple as saying, well, the coal that will not be shipped will just be displaced by coal from someplace else. Because if you don't ship it, you're reducing the total supply globally. Anytime you reduce the supply of something, the price goes up. Like this.
Right.
And if the price goes up, that motivates whoever is burning it to look into alternative fuels.
Right.
So it's not just that cut and dry, I don't think.
Yeah, right.
What goes into the statement that if you look at 44 million tons of coal equals 19 million tons of
CO2.
atmospheric carbon?
It's just an equation.
But how can that happen?
When you burn it.
What are they
When you burn
talking
it,
about?
yeah, when you burn that coal,
Yes.
there's an equation that basically says that amount of coal releases this amount of
It's
CO2.
physically impossible.
If bonds with oxygen, I think.
There you go.
There's something that.
No, it's not physically impossible, because the weight of the coal as a unit of measure, when it's in coal form, is completely different than the mass and weight of the gases that it exudes. So,
But one has to come from the other.
and it's accepted science equation that the weight of thus X amount of coal equals the weight of X amount of greenhouse gases. So you can look it up, you can Google it,
Yeah,
you'll see the
it's a
equations
fairly
everywhere.
standard equation.
And we will be taking a complete pause for questions after Kat speaks in the next presentation as well, so we can be on the same question schedule as our.
It's just because it's pulling oxygen out of the air for combustion, right? And it's all being released as CO2.
Yeah.
Well, CO2 and a lot of other gases, many of which are
Yeah.
even worse than CO2 in terms of global warming.
In terms of, and also in terms of air quality. I'm gonna move on, but I wanted that let's see. So this, I referred to this a little bit. So this would increase our emissions by about 30% in the state of Washington. Yeah, so clearly it's a huge issue for our state, especially a state that is priding itself on trying to move away from coal-fired power plants and coal by wire, actually coming from Montana. We're trying to get off coal strip as well. Okay. So the dust, another real deficiency, and I actually think this is like the worst deficiency in the draft environmental impact statement. They really downplay the problems with coal dust significantly, and basically say there are no impacts from it, or they're very minuscule. So because I think it's important to look at actually where all these trains are going to be moving through, I just wanted to put this up from the draft itself. So some of the coal would be coming from Utah along the purple Union Pacific lines. Most of the coal would come from the Powder River Basin, which is the largest coal deposit in the world. And it would go all the way along those train tracks to Pasco. And then the full ones are the green and the purple lines along the Columbia River. So the full coal trains cannot go over I-90 because they're too heavy and there's too much of an incline for the trains to deal with. But they can take the empty ones back over. So those would be coming through our community. So we would essentially be seeing, somewhere between 5 and 8 trains every day that are empty going along our railroad tracks that move through Lacey and through the Nisqually Reservation. Grace back there, she works on the organic garden at the Nisqually Reservation, so it would be going by there and then over back through I-90. So next slide. So what they do to control dust, yeah.
I was just going to say, the ones that are going back, just because they've been unloaded, doesn't mean that they don't still have
Coal dust in them.
Coal dust.
Exactly. And I'm going to talk a little bit. So the full ones are sprayed with surfactant, which is some sort of a adherent that helps to adhere the coal dust. And actually, it's been a big fight between BNSF and the coal companies for a long time because the coal dust gets onto the train tracks and it causes derailments. So BNSF has been after the coal companies for years, trying to get them to do something about it. And they actually had a court case, and in fact, they got the coal companies to agree to spray this surfactant. And it does reduce dust supposedly by about 85%. Next slide. And they just put in a respray station in Pasco, Washington. Mostly because our neighbors to the north were hammering on them about it, because there are coal export facilities, and the coal trains that you see are headed up to BC, Canada, to an export facility, which the business of which has gone down dramatically. So there's only about one coal train a day at most now. But one thing that the DEIS doesn't do is that the ones coming up from UP, but the Union Pacific, don't go through Pasco, so they're not going to be resprayed. And they kind of say, well, we'll kind of work with the train companies to try and figure that problem out. That's what the draft says. So that's an issue. The other thing on that was a hotline. They sort of say, well, if the dust exceeds these limits that they say they're going to keep it at, we'll have a system in place where they can, where people can call the Southwest Air Agency. So you can have a little hotline with you. So anyway, we think there's some problems there. That's not a clear, good mitigation.
It's a pretty understaffed clean air agency. It's not like,
Puget Sound Clean Air Agency.
Yeah. Clean air. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a small clean air agency.
Mm-hmm. So then, it's a very significant problem for the citizens of Longview. If you go to the next slide, let's go back to that one. So that's with no surfactant. There's a tremendous amount of dust that's released from these trains. As soon as we got it on the BNSF website, because they were in this court case, they had it up. We got a screenshot of it. So it's 645 pounds of coal dust can escape. So with surfactant, but still, with it, it's still a significant amount of dust that escapes. Okay,
Is that per car?
How is that? For what?
Per train. Is that right? Go back to that last slide. I'm sorry, it's each car.
Per car.
Yeah.
So that's 125 car total.
Right. So, well, I won't tell you that. You're running out of time. Okay. So one place there's a study written by Dan Jaffe. If you're interested in coal dust, that's the study to look at in terms of what we think, coal dust should look like in the draft environmental impact study. So it's Dan Jaffe wrote a study, or did a study on coal dust, which was not really well incorporated into the draft environmental impact statement. All right, next. So this is just people living in BC dealing with coal dust on their car. You can see, so this was an expose in the Longview Daily News a while back in 2012, but they went up and actually took pictures of people washing the coal dust off their car up in British Columbia. Okay, so rail traffic. So for us here in Thurston County, that's an issue, an additional 8 trains. It means you can't, in fact, I was talking to a WEC colleague today, and she was stuck behind a coal train with her crying baby in it. So I said, that's kind of funny. She's like, it really wasn't funny at the time. I said, she said, looking back at it, it was kind of funny, but at the time, my baby was screaming. So it's a real issue. They take a lot of time to move past. And our infrastructure, I've learned a lot about rail infrastructure in the last 6 years. Our infrastructure is really not up to the task for all of this traffic. It's actually a pretty good section. It says that this is not mitigatable. There's lots of work that needs to be done on the infrastructure to actually take this amount of traffic. So it's a pretty good section that really points to this just not being a project that the state can support. So it says, without improvements to rail infrastructure to improve rail safety, the proposed action could result in unavoidable and significant adverse impact on rail safety. They actually predict over 11 additional rail accidents per year. This was one that happened in Pasco, a coal train, in 2012. And of course, with the oil trains we were seeing, it's a funny thing, we haven't seen that many oil accidents. You know why that is? Because we're not moving as much oil as we were, because we have stockpiles of it. So we're seeing, because there's less traffic, there's fewer, explosions and derailments and that sort of thing. So the more you have, the more accidents are likely to occur. Oh, I'm done. You can move on. So Longview in particular would be very significantly impacted. There is some upgrades planned. We fought it in the transportation package, but it did get funded. It's just sort of put out many years. That's actually in the town itself along Industrial Way. There's an interchange that would really snarl traffic significantly for the citizens of Longview. And again, that's the SR 432, and unfortunately we're all picking up the tab for that, for the coal companies to benefit and get profits. Okay, so vessel traffic, lots and lots of vessel traffic along the Columbia River. Columbia River has a number of fish species, tribes, of course, fish on it. It's a very significant issue. 184 vessels would be loaded annually, making 1,680 one-way trips in the Columbia River every year. 44% increase. Very significant impacts. Health impacts. So lots of health impacts. Judy, you talked a lot about that. Diesel emissions from the trains and the vessels are actually one of the most difficult things around air quality because it is carcinogen and it does increase the risk of cancer significantly for those. And unfortunately, a lot of these impacts, the rail in Longview does disproportionately impact low-income neighborhoods. So we have a climate justice issue there as well. Noise is a huge, huge issue. I don't know if any of you live by the train tracks. Does anybody live by the train tracks?
A couple miles from the train tracks.
So if you've not experienced it, it's really, really jarring when trains go by. And in fact, this past weekend, Break Free stopped the trains for a little bit. And the folks in Spokane that live by the rail, so Spokane is this major choke point, every train has to go through Spokane. They actually noticed a difference in the number of trains and the amount of disruption that they had in their lives when the trains were not stopped, thanks to the protest up in Anacortes. I thought that was interesting. So that is, I think that is the end. Yep, that is the end of my spiel. There's a lot of great information, and it's actually cited in where you can find it in the draft environmental impact statement in a handout back there. Right, we have that handout.
Yeah, if you didn't get a chance when you came in to look at all the handouts we have there, we have a lot of handouts on the impacts and also talking points for giving public testimony. So check those out and take as many as you want right out. Okay, I think Kat, you're up.
All right. type a little note to our online
Your
audience.
slides on here?
Yes, please.
Easily accessible.
Should be.
I've already had your slides saved here. Oops. Do you have them saved somewhere in your pack?
Let me switch this one over real quickly.
Are there any questions while we're waiting for them to switch up?
So if we go through the EIS and we find that something is, we think deficient, can we have the, ask them to address it?
Yes.
This is still a draft,
It's still a draft.
so, okay.
Yeah. So they'll take all the comments from this phase and make the determinate, they'll go through all of those and make determinations on things that they want to, pay attention to and try and make better. And then and that'll probably take about a year. And then the final will come out, and that final will be final. And that's the document that the decisions will be made on, the permitted decisions.
Yeah, okay.
So this phase is really important.
Okay.
How does Oregon feel about it?
Well, Oregon, that's a really good question. Oregon, actually, the state denied a permit for it was a barge to rail project along the Columbia River, so that it would have been trained into Portland, Oregon, which is across from the Tri-Cities and also the site of their only coal-fired power plant, oddly enough, that has an agreement in place to shutter by 2020. So it would have been trained into there and then barged down the Columbia River to Port Westward, moved out of Panamax ships and shipped out. And the department, their equivalent of the Department of Natural Resources, it's called the Department of State Lands in Oregon, denied the permit. And that's in litigation right now. But we are hoping to get, letters from a number of municipalities. There's a number of elected officials in Oregon who are very concerned about it, and it is a shared resource with the Columbia River.
So, my name is Kat, and I'm a field organizer with Emily and Julie with Washington Environmental Council and Washington Conservation Voters, and I am very honored to help turn out people to the PASCO hearing that's coming up on June 2nd. Not only are there hearings in Longview on the 24th and Spokane on the 26th, but Central Washington will also be impacted, and we are trying our hardest to get 125 people turned out in red to our PASCO hearings, and this is a photograph from the scoping hearings. And there was a wonderful woman who I never had the honor of meeting, but her name was Madeline Brown. She did a lot of wonderful work with the League of Women Voters in Audubon locally, and was a reporter also for the Tri-City Herald, and was a real leader in trying to stop the coal trains going through the Tri-Cities. And she passed away earlier this year, but kind of in her honor, we want to try and get as many people as possible turned out to Central Washington. I put up the same map that Beth shared earlier. I think it's important to consider the Pasco and Tri-Cities area because similar to Spokane, it's kind of a bottleneck for all of the BNSF trains that are coming in loaded with coal and going out with empty cars. They will all be passing through Pasco. And then Benton, Franklin, and Yakima County will also be impacted by the full trains going through Kennewick and then the empty trains coming through Yakima. The impacts on Pasco would be significant also in the sense that these full trains go past their high school, many different elementary schools, and then will cross over the Columbia River. We don't want them to completely throw out this DEIS. We think that there's some really great pieces of it, including the fact that they are looking at broader impacts of the greenhouse gas emissions. However, if you look through the DEIS, you will notice that they have really focused on Cowlitz County. They really haven't taken into consideration the impacts on central Washington. And so we want to acknowledge, especially those folks who are logged in online and are going to the Pasco hearing, that it's the impacts on the Tri-Cities area are incomplete. One of the biggest things that we want to consider in terms of the central Washington impacts are the rail safety and traffic impacts. Beth touched on this. One of the things that the DEIS itself acknowledges is that Washington State's rail system is not equipped to handle these extra 16 trains a day going back and forth across our railways, and they're relying on BNSF to do these upgrades, or is it going to be taxpayers? These are important questions that we need to be asking. The people in Eastern Washington already deal with 70 trains a day that are coming through their communities. So we're asking for another 16 additional trains per day if this project goes through. They didn't look at the impacts of the rail crossings coming down in the Tri-Cities area. They did look at it for Longview and Cowlitz County, and what they said was that the extra downtime in Longview would be 2 additional hours. So this is going to be stopping traffic for up to 2 extra hours in Longview. And our question is, what about the impacts on Pasco? It's a major urban area. This is going to be, the trains will be stopping traffic at one of their busiest intersections. And they didn't even take that into consideration. For me, one of the most important things to bring up are the social and community impacts. When Beth was talking about preparing your public comment to kind of speak from the heart, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that the health impacts will disproportionately affect minority and low-income populations, because these are the people that necessarily live along the rail lines. And Pasco is 54% Hispanic. And we've had a difficult time doing outreach, in part because the language barrier. And so trying to get these materials, I don't even think that the DEIS is available in Spanish language. So right there, you have a disproportionate impact as far as information going out to a population that's going to be very significantly impacted by this project if it goes through. And the health impacts, finally, are some of the most profound things to consider in terms of the Tri-Cities. The Cowlitz County body that is considering the project did not even include a health impact assessment. And so one of the things that we're asking for the final EIS is for a complete health impact assessment that also gets a public comment process. Again, coming back to the diesel particulate matter and all of those toxins, this increase in train traffic coming through the Tri-Cities, going past all of those schools, going past a couple of medical centers, will increase the amount of diesel particulate matter. Many of these schools are located well within a mile of the railroad tracks. Also, in terms of the Tri-Cities, the DEIS did not look at the effect of contamination from coal dust and spills on Washington farmland along the rail corridor, the effect of contamination from coal dust, and the effects of contamination on water supplies in the Tri-Cities, nor did it look at the impacts of the increased coal traffic, what that would have on the agricultural products being shipped to and from central Washington. So the most important thing that we can do to take a stand and try and keep this coal in the ground and stop making our communities a corridor for fossil fuels is to show up at these hearings. So who's going to be here in the room at the Longview hearings? There's going to be a free bus, there's plenty of carpools. If you can't make it, who's going to do an online comment or some written comments at the very least? All right, so for those of you online that are in the Tri-Cities, who's going to be at the hearing on June 2nd. I hope you all are raising your hands online. There's going to be a rally at 4 p.m. Once again, we were completely unable to reserve a room at the hospitality suite. They tried to offer us a patch of grass that we could rent for our rally. That was at the complete opposite end of the track center site for $250, and we politely declined to rent their patch of grass. But we are so excited to celebrate the recent success with GPT and the Army Corps decision closing or taking away that proposal, and we want to see similar results for the Millennium Bulk Terminal proposal in Longview, and we will do everything that we can to have outstanding turnout in the Tri-Cities. So shall we turn it over to some questions?
Yeah, does anyone have any more questions they didn't get answered that they would like to ask? Yeah.
I'm just curious, this is the draft EIS. Now,
Yes.
does that mean that the next opportunity for public intervention is in fact an appeal, or do we get to comment on the final draft?
So the final draft, we will not get to comment on, but the other, as Beth mentioned before, there's two environmental review processes going on, and because this project, the Longview Coal Export Terminal, has both state and federal permits, that means that they have to go through SEPA, the State Environmental Policy Act, EIS process, and they also have to go through NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act process. So I think it's September now is the release. So it'll be September will be the release of the draft environmental impact statement for NEPA. So that will be our next opportunity to give public comment on that one. And I believe we're expecting that one will not be as comprehensive. That's the deciding agency on that is the Army Corps of Engineers. We'll have to wait and see how comprehensive it is, but this is probably our best chance to really use all the information we've been given for our public comments this time around.
This handout shows the Westway terminal in Oakland as a proposed terminal. So that means it could be approved. And
That's an oil terminal. That's an oil terminal?
Yeah.
Oil terminal.
So there's different, I think it's circles for oil and squares for coal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's an oil
Yeah, there's
terminal.
a key down there.
So in addition to the coal trains that would go through Castle, the additional coal trains, that wouldn't be all that would be possible. In addition to that, then you'd still have the oil trains, which are full of Bakken field oil, which is highly flammable, many of which have exploded. So something like that, can that go into a DEIS?
It wouldn't go into it for this.
It actually does. It does. There's a cumulative impact section of the draft environmental impact statement that looks at the cumulative impacts of these projects.
So that scenario would not be excluded.
So, right, yeah.
Oh, and that would be the cumulative impact of any other similar activities, regardless of who.
I think that's right. I actually haven't looked at that piece in the draft yet, so I'm not certain what all they included, but it's certainly a place to look in the draft environmental impact statement and make sure that it is included. But it is a big, we did a lot of work on trying to build our cumulative arguments, and unfortunately, thank goodness they've gone away. So the cumulative impacts of all those projects, initially it was like 60 trains a day additional if all of the projects had been built.
Yeah, so I have a question about submitting comments. Are they only taking like electronic email comments, or do they take handwritten letters, and if so, does that carry any more impact if you handwrite a letter, or what do you suggest?
So you can go online to the Millennium Bulk EIS website, and you can submit comments there. You can go to the Power Pass Coal website and submit our kind of pre-written comment, which you can also make edits to personalize for yourself, but that's a good place to go if you're not quite sure what you want to say. You can fill out the comment cards that we brought here tonight, or you can write in your own letter, or you can go give public testimony. And I believe they're all weighted. They're all weighted the same, no matter how you submit comments, so we're not giving preference. You're not giving preference to people who take their entire day to go out to the public testimony period.
We have a comment from Regna Merritt with Physicians for Social Responsibility. Regna is sharing that the 5 study areas with the largest increase in vehicle delays are all in Spokane County. I think that makes sense because it's that bottleneck where all the trains have to pass through. Thank you, Regna.
Thanks, Regna. Anyone else have any questions before we hand it off to Barb? You're up. Okay.
Okay, I'm Barb Scavezze, as some of you local people know me. I'm involved in a number of environmental issues. I've been in local organizations. And I've been involved in environmental issues for a number of years. And I've given public testimony at several local meetings during public comment periods, like sustainability planning meetings, Thurston County Commissioner meetings, etc. I became interested in fighting climate change about 10 years ago, and we're already seeing the effects of climate change here in Washington State with our receding glaciers and reduced snowpack, and that affects the very water that we drink. So this is really an important issue for us. And now I'm a grandmother. I have 5 grandchildren under the age of 4, and I'm especially concerned about the effect of climate change on their future. So that makes me fight harder. As you know, we must keep fossil fuels in the ground if we have any chance of preserving this planet for livability. So I got involved in Power Paths Coal, courtesy of Beth, and Stand Up to Oil. When I heard about all the fossil fuel terminals that were being proposed for our area, I've attended several public hearings. I've been talking to Beth, okay, where are we going this week, What are we fighting this week? Is it oil, coal, whatever? And I've actually managed a few bus trips to a couple of the hearings. And when you go to a hearing, you get a number when you sign in, and then you get to speak if your number is called. And most of them have been drawn randomly. The last one I was at, when you signed in, you got a number. And so you knew when your number was going to be called. And I'm glad that they're changing that for this one.
Right, yeah.
Back to the random system. And they also didn't allow any substitutions. If your number didn't match that name, they got upset. Because I sometimes often give my number up so that somebody who is really well prepared and has the background knowledge to speak can speak. Because there's not enough time for everybody. I'm always prepared to speak, but, I haven't been called usually. But what's really important is when you see 1,000 people in red shirts and waving their signs when you agree with the speaker. And the last one, we couldn't raise our signs, but we could do this. So you had 1,000 people or whatever doing this. It's pretty impressive, and I think that affects the people that are hearing the testimony, just to see all the support for what's being said. And so when you're attending the hearing, wear red. And if you don't have a fancy red shirt like this, I have my red sweater, I have in the winter, I have a long sleeve red shirt. When I'm outside, I have my red coat because the last time we didn't have a heated room, for our, big rally and stuff if you're outside. So wear red. It doesn't matter if it says, what it says on it, just wear red.
Because Historical Savage rented all of those rooms,
Right. Yeah.
In Vancouver.
Yeah, so we were outside. And it was November or something, it was horrible. Yeah.
Wear layers of red.
Yes, wear layers of red. And then, and bring food and water. Hospitality suite is great, but, if you don't get over there or if they run out of food, bring your own food and water. And if your number is called and you are going to speak, get in the queue immediately. They usually call like maybe 10 people up. You get in the queue so that you don't delay the hearing, so that when it's your turn, boom, right up there at the mic. And it's really important to follow all the rules that the moderator sets. Or they may take a recess, which we had some discussion at the last one I was at, and they did take a recess. They said, we have to stop and think about this, and we all took a little break. So listen to the rules. If they don't want you to talk, you don't talk. If they don't want you to say yay, don't say yay.
That was the Raging Grannies.
Was that why we took a recess?
Oh, yeah.
It was the Raging Grannies that stopped the hearing.
So there's no clapping, booing, yelling, zip it. And you can talk quietly to your neighbors, but, and usually you can wave signs. I don't know what they're going to say for the next one. They wouldn't let us wave them last time.
Yeah, they're signs.
Yeah.
They're 10 by 10, 10 inches by 10 inches.
Yeah, so.
Woohoo.
So you wave your signs, and when you look out and you see all these people waving your signs, it makes you feel good that you're part of this huge group and you're having an impact, because it is impressive. So let's see, so you only get 2 minutes to speak, and at the last one it was obvious that my number wasn't going to be called, but they did have a court recorder. So I went over and talked to the court recorder, and I could talk as long as I wanted. And I did. I had all my issues. And when you're giving your testimony, really think about what it is you want to say. And if you don't have time to analyze the DEIS, look at the talking points that Power Pass Cole provides, because they always get you well prepared. And pick one issue to discuss, and make sure it's relevant. But if it's coming from Power Pass Cole, it's sure to be relevant. And because it's got to be things that the agencies actually have control over. And then think about what perspective you bring to the hearing. Are you a doctor, a teacher, a nurse, or whatever, or a grandparent, or a firefighter, or you're concerned about, you live in a small town and you're concerned about the railroad crossings. So speak from that perspective, because that's from your heart. Speak from that perspective. And as a grandmother, I'm concerned about a lot of things, but I'm concerned, let's say, about the coal dust that's blowing off. And you got to remember that your testimony can touch on facts and emotion, because these are people, and you might be able to reach them, in a similar situation, and maybe they have, somebody in a similar situation. So I'm just going to give you a sample testimony. Some of these things really aren't true, but just to give you an idea. And I haven't looked at the talking points, so I'm not sure what I'm going to be saying next week, if I get the chance to talk or talk to a court reporter. So, thank you for the opportunity to testify at this hearing. And don't spend too much time on that, though, because you only get 2 minutes. My name is Barb Scavezze. I'm from Olympia, Washington. And I'm a grandmother. I've got 5 grandchildren under the age of 5. How many times can I say that? Just once. My oldest grandchild has severe allergies, and I'm concerned about the coal dust that blows off the trains and the diesel exhaust, and that gets into the air he breathes and the dirt he plays in when he goes to the playground. And I might go on and on and on about how many trains are coming and all that. And, please do not approve this facility or ask for no action alternative. Thank you for your time. So, you've got 2 minutes, so you can say more than that. But that's just to give you an idea.
Awesome. Do we have any questions for Barb on giving awesome public comment?
Any other questions?
Yay!
Okay, well, if no one has any more questions about public testimony, then Grace Bird is here, and she's going to close us off and finish us up for the evening. Thank you, Grace.
So my name is Grace Bird, and I've been to several public hearings, a lot regarding coal. I started out in 2012, with total strangers, and I hopped a bus, so I hopped a bus and I hopped in a car.
How can I
I did not know her. My family's like, oh, shit, I did. Okay. But the point is that you get in there and you go. It's really important. You may think, well, my statement may not mean as much as, Barb's. So, but it does. It really does make a difference. It makes a difference in showing up, suiting up. All your comments matter. I would be specific. If you can't write specific EIS scoping comments, I would just get with one of the organizers. I think my first couple of speeches, I asked for help. I'm like it needs to be direct. Myself, I would say, I'm Grace Bird, and I'm a Nisqually tribal member. But in Longview, I'm going to say I'm also callous, and this is going to affect me. This is my blood that is affecting, and my descendants deserve a place to come back to call them home. And so it's a treaty rights, and I would speak on the fact that there's a smelting that's really concerning me, because the Nisqually tribe, which I'm enrolled in, has smelting rights in Longview for the Cowlitz River there. And that's really important, is to defend our treaty rights. Yeah. But you have to keep it brief. My best speech was 1 minute, 38 seconds. I got better at it. My first speech, I had 2 pages, and I would just make little bullets, and like this needs to be hit on, this needs to be touched on, this needs to be said, and this is the most powerful. And you bring a highlighter, bring a pen, bring a paper. I've never gone prepared really, but I've always used their paper and their made out for a little comment statement. It's really important to not just make a public statement, write a comment, also do the recording. I do all what I can, because my comments, and then I've gone back and read them. I've read my own comments. I'm like, wow, that was amazing. I was like, yes, I said it. It matters. And so what you say in those little rooms, in the recorders, in public, and don't be shy from the microphone. It's the biggest problem, is don't be shy from the microphone. Get up there, speak your voice, because you really need to be heard. This is an environmental impact that will take place, and if you don't speak up, we won't know what you could have said. So it's really important to keep it local, keep the, like it's central Washington, but say you travel through there. I've also used that in my comments before. So I travel. I have family that live in Portland, and I'm traveling through there. I'm concerned about coal dust. I'm concerned about I have asthma, and I'm concerned about my medical issues and the medical issues of the town. I've heard doctors speak on the chemicals, the coal dust, what was the chemical you said they spray it with?
The surfactant.
Yeah, that one. Spoke about the chemicals in Longview, and it was amazing how the room just lit up, and they were like, she was so knowledgeable about her her medical background and the medical statement that she made. And it really made a difference in the room, the things that she said. So you could be one of those speakers, and what you have to say can be just as important.
Do we have any questions for Grace?
Any final questions before we wrap up? Well, I hope everyone is excited now to make it out to the public hearing, and if you can't, to convince at least one friend to go to the hearing in your place, or submit those online public comments, write in your public comments, do whatever you can to make sure our voice is heard before the 13th. You have a final comment, Kat?
Yes, I think before we completely sign out, while we still have Grace here and all of our speakers, there might be some folks on the phone. I'm going to unmute folks on the phone. If anybody wants to ask a question and you're not able to use the chat box. Who's this?
I would like to. It's Elliot Weinstein down in Portland.
Okay.
I would like to know if there's any place you can download these presentations so we can look at them, because I don't have access to any of the data on the back table.
Great question. I am recording this presentation, and I will make sure that we email out the notes and all of the materials that are on the back table. I'll put my email address up, and that way you guys can email me if you don't already have my email address.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
can we give you our email address?
Sure. Are you on a phone or are you on the computer?
I'm on a phone.
Okay, yeah. I'll just take it right now. Okay, what is your email address?
Okay, it's very easy. Elliot, ELYETTE, at msn.com.
Can you spell it one more time?
ELYETTE at msn.com.
Perfect. All right, we will make sure that you get access to all of these things. Thank you. Is there anybody else on the phone or with a microphone that wants to ask a question? No? Well, I'd love to thank everybody. Emily as well did such a great job organizing this, and I'd like to thank our 15 people that have been logged in online. And thank you to everybody here in the room. I think everybody, give yourselves a big round of applause. You all are so wonderful.
And thank you so much for our speakers and for everyone here for taking the time out of your days to come here and learn a little bit more about this project and prepare to go to the hearing. I know this isn't easy work, and that's why I'm so happy to see that people have taken this time to show their grassroots support for this issue and committed to really doing our part to help stop this project. And if you haven't already, please sign a comment card in the back. Julie in the red shirt back there can show you where they are. If you can't make it to the public hearing, or feel free to take some comment cards if you know some friends or family who haven't signed them as well who may want to. And do remember that we have a bus from Olympia leaving at 10:40 a.m. sharp from the Martin Way Park and Ride to go to that hearing on the 24th. So no need to worry about the registration. Oh, you did.
Should we do a photo? Should we do a photo?
I want you to fill out right here now, or
Stop recording.